Story, come to us, wild wind that you are, bird of unknown plumage, wolf with mirror-bright eyes, and a tail that knows the stars. Story, come, be with us, blue letter in an alphabet of air, in an alphabet of earth. Story, be welcome here. Hello and greetings. This is the Crane Bag Podcast, and I am Jay Leeming, your host, as we explore the stories of the world. What is this? Well, today, I'm not going to tell you a story. Today, I'm going to talk about ways of approaching a story. If you wish to tell a story, this is a good start. And if you're interested in the craft of storytelling, we're all storytellers in a way, human beings that we are, two-leggeds that we are, walking this iron earth with the leaves in the trees, like feathers of a bird we will never see. We are all storytellers. So thank you for joining me. That's what you got on your hands this time. There's other podcasts where it's a story, just bang. But on this one, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explore with you some ideas about what a story is and how to approach a story. So this is called Approaching a Story. All right, then. Well, for starters, I would just like to give thanks. I would like to give thanks to my teachers in story. Some in person, some not so much in person. I'd like to thank Ben Haggerty. I'd like to thank Martine Prechtel. I'd like to thank Martin Shaw. I'd like to thank Gioia Timpanelli. I'd like to thank Michael Mead. I'd like to thank Robert Bly. I'd like to thank Danny Deerdorf. And I'd like to thank the forces beyond them, unknown and mysterious, which have contributed to this moment, this occasion, this instant in eternity, in which I presume to tell you a few things, ideas which are not my own, which I have borrowed from the big calendar of eternity, which I've heard from other folks and have given my own spin to. So that's the way this thing goes. That's the way we are in this world. Teachings are passed on one to the other. So what is a story? Exactly. Perhaps that's a good place to start. Humans have invented writing. Did you notice? Yeah, we've invented writing, and that has changed a lot of things. It's changed how we think. It's changed how we live. For most of our history on this planet, humans did not have writing. We had oral culture. Stories lived in the voice. They lived in people. They lived in the land. That was the understanding. They lived in a divine realm, perhaps, depending on where you are, what culture we're talking about. So we've gone and written these stories down, which is a wonderful thing. And it preserves them in a certain way, though the oral culture preserved stories as well, let us not forget, for thousands of years. It's easy for us to think, oh, well, phew, now it's like we're on shore after being at sea. It's like, phew, man, I'm glad we wrote all those things down because now they're safe. Whereas before they were not safe and they were just loose. Where were they? I don't know. Somehow, where were they in the world? You couldn't go look them up. I don't know. But in fact, that's a prejudice we have as products of a literate culture. They were pretty safe before. Was the Odyssey safe? Well, it's lasted 3,000 years, which isn't to say that there are powers of forgetting which come to humans, and we forget stuff, and stories are lost and destroyed, no question. But I'm not sure written or oral culture can be said to be better or worse at that particular craft. So we've written stories down, and so this gives us this interesting feeling that a story is the words. But I'm here to tell you that the story is not the words. The story is what happens. Take that in. The story is not the words. The story is what happens. So if the story is not the words, how do you relate to it? How do you learn it? How do you approach it? If it is the words, if it is the words in the book, well, it's easy. It fits right in with how we live. You go buy the book, you get it from the library. Oh, a little sketchy there. Ooh. But one way or another, you get it into your house and you have that story. If you've bought the story, it's like, oh, I own the story. I have it. It gives us the illusion that a story can be destroyed. You can burn the book, for example. It gives us the illusion it can be preserved in this way, as we preserve books in libraries often. So it's a material thing. And also we have control over it. Notice that. And it's a lovely thing. I mean, hey, I love reading. Don't get me wrong. My house is crammed with books. But you can take the book off the shelf. You can take the story off the shelf, open it, read it, and when you want to pause, when you want to go get a cup of coffee, you can set it aside. Or when you've had enough, you close the book and put it away. This gives us all of the agency. It gives us complete control. And I think it's an illusion. It makes it seem that it's entirely up to us. We choose a story to read, to experience. We experience it as long as we want to, at the pace we want to, and then we set it aside. But many, in my experience, indigenous tellers of stories, by which I mean indigenous North America, so people of the many tribes of this land that I've run into, would say the story chose you. The story chose you. To have control over the story, it rules out the chance, the possibility that you could be seized by a story. Oh, it came to me. It jumped into me, It took hold of me. And sometimes that's how it feels in my experience. It's like, whoa, check that out. Oh, I got to tell that. That's amazing. I want to be in that story. That's what it feels like to me. So when I hear this from indigenous folks, I like that. It rings true to me. So having a story written down, it gives us the illusion that we're in complete control and rules out the possibility that the story itself has agency, like other things in this world, like birds, like the wind, like fish in the river, like the bear or the raccoon. It can have ideas and desires and may have chosen you as much as you have chosen it. So if the story is not the words, if the words simply carry it, but the story is something else, how do we relate to it? How do we connect with it? If it's not an object which can be owned in this sort of capitalist system, how do you connect to it? Is it like a divine being you can summon, you can invite to be with you, some sort of spirit perhaps? Or perhaps it's like an animal which you can coax to come closer to you, an animal you can try to hunt, but remembering that hunting is not just shooting things, it's also patience, it's waiting, it's knowing the habits and the patterns, the ways of moving through the world of the animal you wish to be closer to. It is understanding that animal so you know where they go, what they do, so you can be there and wait for them to come. And it is like perhaps a lover courting someone. Again, which is similar in some ways to hunting, knowing their patterns. What do they like? What do they see that they love? You find that thing. And that is a way to connect with that person who you find so beautiful and so lovely, and that you want to be closer to because of the demands of your heart. So all of these ways have been helpful to me. But here are three in particular that I find. Here are three alternate ways of looking at story that I've picked up over the years. I'm going to just summarize them, and then we're going to go deeper in. So a story is a song. A story is a forest. A story is a dream. So, looking at those one by one, if a story is a song, well, what does that mean? Think about songs you know and how you learned them. Maybe you learned them from a book. Maybe you didn't. But those two types of learning are different. And similarly, analyzing a song can be helpful. You've got some song, let's say it's a pop song, a rock and roll song, and you're like, it's so great, it's so catchy. And you sit down and you're like, oh, okay, verse, chorus, bridge, guitar solo, chorus. Wow, that's kind of interesting. And then you look at another song and it's like, oh, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, no bridge, guitar solo. You get what I'm saying. You can analyze a song, and that can teach you some things. But that type of knowledge is qualitatively different from the knowledge you get from actually singing the song. Think about Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Simple song we've all heard. We can go in there. We can look at its sources. We can look at the imagery, the life is but a dream, the river, the boat, all that. That's cool. That's good to do. Don't get me wrong. But you really learn that thing by singing it. And so that's how I relate to story. It's like a song. You just got to sing that song over and over again until you learn it. That's how I have learned songs in my life, and it is how I learn story. I just keep doing it until I get it into my head, into my body. And also, I just want to get at something else, something sort of magical about it. Like a song. I mean, think about songs. When you're in a song, it creates its own time, its own little time signature. It's like you're apart from the normal clock time. And perhaps we've all had this experience. I hope you've had this experience where you go deeply into a song and it's like a spell. It's like everything's different and you're in that song and then it ends and you're like, wow, what just happened? Well, that's my experience often, on the good days, of story. And I don't get that from reading the sheet music, on the wall there. I get it from actually singing the song. In a way, we never possess story. Story possesses us. And if we can be said to own it in any way, we only own it when we are telling it or hearing it told, when we are in it in that intense way. That's really the only time we can be said to have it, if that language of having and not having is of any use even at all. All right, so another idea. A story is like a forest. Now, in the broader sense, I would say, well, a story is like an ecosystem or a landscape. But ecosystem, that's a fine word, but it's a little abstract. Ecosystem, it sounds a little sciencey. I can't see anything when I hear that word. Landscape, again, we have this sense of like, well, the humans are the active parts of this, and the land is like a background for us. So both of those words, aren't as helpful. But what I mean to say is a story is like a forest, but it's also like a desert, like a jungle, like a river. It's like a natural area, if I can use those abstract terms. But all those terms are, like I say, abstract and kind of bland. So I'm just going to say it's like a forest, because I think most of my listeners are familiar with what a forest is. So what does that mean if a story is like a forest? Think about that. If a story is like a forest. Well, there's weather in a forest. Forests change. It's autumn. The leaves turn orange, yellow. They fall down. There's snow. There's rain. There's also other things living in the forest. It's trees, but it's also moss. It's ants. It's birds. It's the fox there behind the boulder, scampering away. There he goes. Also, the forest is different every time you enter it. If we're not paying attention, it feels like, oh, it's the same old forest. The trees are there, the boulders are there. But then one day we go in and the tree's fallen down or whatever, it's burned or something like that. And in the most detailed sense, when we are really in tune, well, the forest is never the same, is it? There's frost on the morning on the grasses or whatever. There's a particular bird singing in a certain way. Also, a forest can be entered from many different directions. Now, again, so if a story is like a forest, that would imply that a story can be entered from many different directions. I think of, for example, a Grimm's fairy tale. Think of it as a forest, and the Grimm brothers wrote it down. And as they did so, they charted a particular path through that story. And it's a fine path, and you can follow that path, but you can also make your own path. There are other ways through that landscape, perhaps in rearranging the events, in looking them at slightly different ways. You might come to the same boulder that they came to, but you're standing in a slightly different place, and the shadows are different, and the moss is different. And you hear a bird that no one in that forest has ever heard before. Also, I would ask you to consider how we usually relate to the natural world these days as a species. When we approach a forest, we see it as a resource. It is timber. It is something to be used. And most of us approach story in the same way. We're going to use it. And sometimes with the best intentions. I'm going to use this story to tell people that they should be nice to each other. I'm going to use this story to promote whatever, community and love in the world. Well, those are good goals. But really, we should aspire to be used by the story. The story is not our tool that we can use to accomplish a certain task necessarily. It is its own beast. It's its own river. And we are smaller than it. Think of the age of these stories. We are smaller than it. And so I would say we should aspire to be used by these stories. Because otherwise, we can easily get swept away into the realm of something like propaganda. I'm going to use the power of this story for my own ends. And who's to say whether those ends are good or evil, to use storytelling terms? Who's to say you are really in touch with something ultimate when you're choosing to use a story to manipulate people to feel a certain way? It's better just bring that story alive and kicking into the room. Serve that story and bring it alive into the room. And if it has work to do, it will do that work. If it has gifts to give to people, it will give those gifts. Not long ago, I was flying home from Europe, flying from Greece to New York City. And I was delayed on the way. There was a storm, and things were delayed, and I spent a day in London. Airline put me up in a hotel. That was the whole deal. But at the time, I was like, oh, this is just what I needed, actually. I need a day of rest, of vacant time, vacant space on this long journey, all the way from Greece. I'd been there 2 months. Back home, I needed a day to just kind of sit and look around and be like, whoa. Plus, it was great to be in England. It was a nice kind of doorway. I was like, oh, this is closer to home culturally, but it's not all the way there. And it was a great little moment. But then I considered, well, the storm kind of gave me this. It gave me something which was actually nourishing and helpful to me and healthy. Something I wasn't wise enough to know that I needed. And wouldn't have chosen for myself, because I did want to get home. I'd been away a long time. I was ready to go home. And then I thought, well, what if the storm did this for everybody? Let's say 2,000 people were delayed. Flights were canceled, all over in Heathrow and stuff. Let's say 2,000 people missed their flights and spent a night in London. And look at all the disruption. Think of the disruption. Oh, they missed a wedding. Oh, they missed this or that, Sounds like a big pain. But what if in some way that storm, as if it were some sort of divine being, which perhaps it is, gave everyone what they most needed, even if it was bitter, even if it was a hassle. It was a hassle they needed to grow and to become more fully themselves. And so perhaps the story is like that. To choose, I'm going to do this particular thing with the story. I'm going to have this particular effect on people. Well, it's natural to think that way, and it's not entirely wrong. But beyond that, we just need to bring the story alive into the room. Relax all your human purposes to bring peace, to get people to vote, to whatever it is you want them to do. Relax a little bit about that. And I think a more helpful attitude is to simply bring the story alive into the room. Our task is to serve the story, not to use it to accomplish something. And in considering this, I invite you again to consider how we, human beings, relate to the natural world. And I've mentioned already how we tend to treat the natural world as a resource to be used for certain things. But we also desire to change the natural world in specific ways so it is more to our liking. For example, in a forest, we might see, oh, there's lots of honeysuckle there. I think I'm going to rip out all that honeysuckle. I think those pine trees, there's too many pine trees. I'm going to cut them down. I want only deciduous trees here. In the same way, people hang on to stories. They find stories, and immediately they want to change those stories. Now, that's not exactly wrong to have that impulse. I have it myself, and I do change stories. It's part of what storytellers do. You change a story to fit, your own self. You change it to fit the audience and the particular time in which you're telling it. But for the most part, most people rush into this too quickly. They come into that forest for the first time with their saw, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to make some changes here. So like a natural area, a story is going to give us the most back if we respect it and honor it and hang out for a while. Spend a year living in that forest and then decide you want to get rid of the honeysuckle, and then decide you want to get rid of this particular pine tree. Because by then, you might understand why the honeysuckle is there, why the pine tree is there. And I hope you can do the jujitsu here, do the yoga move, and apply all this to the story. There's a part of a story you find, and you're like, oh, that's gross, it's gory, it's patriarchal, it's matriarchal, it's whatever, I don't like it, And so you're like, I'm taking it out. But after you live with that story for a while, you might find that detail is necessary. Those mosquitoes and those wolves, that troublesome raccoon in the forest, well, they're there for a reason. And you will only learn that by being in there for a while and having some humility and trust that the forest knows what it's doing. And if there's a raccoon in there, the raccoon's there for a reason. All right. Well, I'd like to go into stories and dreams. But first, I'm going to give us a little musical break here of about 2 minutes, just so you and I can ponder some of these things, because that was kind of a lot of ideas there. All right. Be back with you in a moment. All right. So we are back. So perhaps I should say here that a story, in the most basic sense, is a sequence of events. It's not the language about those events. It is simply those occurrences, those images. I mean, that's another definition, another way to think about that. It's a sequence of images. And that leads us to this third way of thinking about story, which is that a story is like a dream. Well, that's a very airy type of a sentence to say. A story is a dream. Well, oh man, how helpful is that? Well, I ask you to take this in and take it seriously. We don't take dreams seriously. We don't often trust them. We don't often remember them. But they are important and vital parts of our reality. So I would ask you to consider that a story is like a dream, and in the best way, when we relate to story, when we relate to dreams in the most fruitful and generous way, well, that's a really good model for relating to story. And in particular, I'm thinking of Mr. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, thinker, healer, writer. And his ideas about relating to dreams are very helpful for those wishing to relate to story. So let's look at this real briefly. I would say, for starters, don't seek a meaning. Yeah. The story isn't code for something else. Someone didn't sit down and be like, oh, I want a story that tells people that they should be peaceful all the time, or that trees are good, or that you can't trust everybody. And I'm going to make a story to express that. That's not how it works. It's not a code. It's not like, oh, I'm going to use this secret language of whatever, a wizard in the forest and a witch and three brothers, just to give you that meaning. We put meaning onto things, certainly. But what's the meaning of a flower? What's the meaning of a cloud? Well, yeah, it can have a meaning, a rain cloud. Oh, it means I'm depressed today. It means fruitfulness and abundance, and the harvest is coming, and plants are going to come out of the earth. You see what I'm saying? So always, I would say, nearly always, it's unwise to seek a meaning in a story. And that's because it's not a code. It's also because meanings change over time. A tree alone in a field, what does it mean? Well, it could mean loneliness, but it could also mean strength, independence, and freedom, depending on who you are, where you are in life, if it's a rainy Saturday in a basement somewhere, or if you're on stage at Carnegie Hall, or if you're at the Pyramid of the Sun, your mood changes, the mood of the audience changes, and the world changes. And so for that reason, it is not a good idea, I would say, to seek a meaning for a story and say that it always has that meaning. All right. What else do we get from Mr. Jung? Well, this is, again, in relating to dreams, often he would amplify the dream. What he meant by that is to take an image in the dream and connect it to other things, other stories and images in the world. For example, you dream about a wall. And so you could sit there for a while thinking, oh, what does this mean? But you could also just think about walls. What is your experience of walls? And what are walls in the world? Well, there's the wall, Mr. President Guy wants to build between us and Mexico. That's a wall. There's the wall between the two halves of Berlin. If you're older, you might remember that. There's Pink Floyd, The Wall, an album. And so right away you have things to dance with. You're like, oh, Pink Floyd, that was like a psychological wall in that album, if you know that, Walls keep people out, they keep people in. What about walls in your own life? Was there a wall in your childhood? These things, Robert Frost, Mending Wall in the poem. So these things widen the world of the image, and it sort of hums. It's very much like when you have musical instruments in a room and you play one of them and the others respond. Like my frame drum here, if I'm talking while I'm talking now, it kind of sings along with me. Or if I play the guitar, it feels the resonance and it echoes it and it kind of gets into the game. And the drum is like, all right, I hear that. Yes, I agree. So it's a way to widen things. So with story, it's the same. If you have a image in a story, amplify it and associate it, connect it with other images in your life. If you have a comb at the bottom of the sea, Sedna's hair is being combed, well, what is your experience of combs? What does the comb mean to you? What combs have you had? You get what I'm saying. So it's fruitful to connect the story to the world, and it's fruitful to connect it with your life as well. Also, it can be helpful to translate a dream into another medium. And it is the same with story. Again, this comes from Jung. He would ask his patients to draw their dreams, for example. And that's a wonderful exercise, a fruitful craft. I would recommend it. In the same way, take that story and make it into something else. Draw a picture, make it a song, make it a dance, make it a walk you do in the world. In the history of the world, that's how stories are communicated. I mean, myths in ancient Greece aren't just told by people. They're also told through stone in the form of statues. They're on pottery. Have you seen those vases? Crazy. Every pot, every plate you have, it seems like, would have, there's Aphrodite, there's Zeus, there's Hermes, So the stories you're soaked in story because they're all around you. When you eat food, when you drink water, the story is there. And so in the same way, if you are working on a story, if we can use that word, if you're approaching a story and getting into it, a good practice is to translate it into another medium in some way. All right, what else do I have to say? A story is also like a traveler from a distant and foreign land. And you might consider how you would treat such a traveler who came to your door. And they will be different from you. Just by definition, you will be different from them, they'll be different from you. Their clothes, their way of speaking, the way they eat, the way they talk, it'll all be different. And you're going to learn the most from that traveler if you treat them with respect and honor them. And when they come into your house, you're not going to be right away like, oh, take off that swan feather vest, take off that silly hat, stop smoking in my house, and then I can relate to you. It sounds boorish, it sounds obnoxious, but that is often how many people relate to story. It isn't what I want it to be. I'm going to change it into something more familiar to me, more comfortable, less smelly. When these stories, actually, they come from different cultures. Even the Grimm's fairy tales, if you are descended from European Americans, for example, you might think, oh, this is great, this is comfortable. I can tell this story. I have a right to tell this. It's not some myth from Kenya. It's not a Chinese story. I'm not appropriating. I'm just telling something from my culture. There's some truth to that, no question. You might have grown up with those stories in a way which you didn't grow up with the stories of China, for example, or Brazil. But we need to remember that these stories are very old and they come from oral culture. It's a different culture. You're reading that fairy tale and you want to tell it, but the forest they had when they were telling that story 2,000 years ago, because that's how old these are, especially the fairy tales. Some of them go back 5,000, 6,000 years. Not all of them, but they're quite old, most of them. What forest did they have? Christianity? Was this before or after? Frequently, it was probably before. Other folks since then have added on Christian things to these stories. The Middle Ages, as we conceive of them in this sort of Hollywood Disney way, these stories predate what we call the Middle Ages. So it's a different culture. And it is presuming a lot to think you can just stride right in there and it's your turf, your territory. No, it's much better to respect this traveler who has come to you. And more than that, I would flip it and say it's more like you're a guest in a foreign land and you're going to this foreign country, and it's the same there. You will learn the most from that culture if you stop telling everybody what to do. I mean, can you imagine? You're in Israel and you're like, everybody, what are these weird hats? Take off your silly hats. I mean, yeah, no, it's painful to think about that type of thing. But again, often we relate to story in that way. So it's fruitful to think of story as another land, another culture. You're a guest there. And so what do you do when you're a guest? If you want to learn from another culture, if you want to truly get something, receive something, if you want to truly be there in the most honest and nourishing way, well, you listen, you pay attention, you simply be in that land, and you look around, you see what you see, you hear what you hear. And why is it painful for me to think of that, to imagine some boorish, crazy tourist yelling at everybody? I guess because I've been excluded and I've been welcomed. And I know what those things feel like. And I've felt like a stranger in a foreign country. I've been a stranger in a foreign country. And I've felt like someone on the outside. And I've also been welcomed. And I think to some degree we've all known what those things are like. And so how would you like to feel when you're in that foreign land? How would you like to be welcomed? Remember that and treat the story that way. So, seeing the story as a traveler, seeing the story as a foreign land is fruitful. I missed one other thing from Jung, however, which is this. All of the story is within you. Now, this isn't only from Jung. It's also an idea you find in many cultures in the world. In India, folks I've heard at least would conceive of the universe as being within you, just as it is out there in the world. So in the same way, the story is within you. So the characters in that story are parts of yourself. That's what Jung would say. That cruel witch, that cruel king, whoever it is, that shining hero, that beautiful princess, all of these sort of flat characters, together they make up a psyche. They're flat so you can step into them and inhabit them. If they have a detailed story, these characters, well, it shuts you out. If you say, well, there was this princess from Bavaria and her name was this and she had this. I mean, that's cool, but it's more like a novel. What stories do is they have some vacancy in them so you can step into them and inhabit them. The whole structure of a fairy tale is like the psyche, the self of a person. And what's happening in there, those are movements inside of you. The land of the dead, it's in you, and all that stuff, and the shining palace where there's a feast and there's wine spilled on the floor and everybody's laughing, that is in you as well. So that also can be a helpful way to relate to story. And not just helpful, but essential. I mean, good grief, I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying in all of these comments. What does the poet William Carlos Williams say? In a poem, he says, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. These stories contain treasures which we desperately need and which are crucial gifts to us, which ease our passage through this world and give us knowledge and wisdom and reassurance and so many things which we require. Yet these treasures are too often unseen, unacknowledged, not delivered. These stories are seen as trite, they're seen as for children, and their depths are glossed over, and those depths are nourishing to us. I've seen this among storytellers, and of course I've seen it in the world. Among storytellers, I can think of occasions where I've been in a room where many stories were told, and gods and demons were summoned. I mean, that's what these stories do. They summon these powers. Well, many of them do. But it's as if those divine beings showed up and were unseen, unacknowledged, and then they kind of quietly drifted away. When we need the gifts they bring us, it's like they're holding out bowls full of fruit and no one sees it, no one eats it, no one notices it, and away they go. Because, well, we don't want to go down. We're afraid of the depths and the heights, and it's comfortable to live on the flat middle plane where everything's just what it is. And of course, I've been lucky enough to be in situations where the depths of these stories were acknowledged and explored. And it was a safe enough environment where we could all feel that in the room. And you do need a safe environment. I mean, it's tough in like a bar or something when you're telling a story to really go down into it. So I am who I am in part because I've had those moments, and others have guided me in finding the depths of these stories. And the stories do survive. I mean, they can take it. It's not like some kind of church. You don't need to just, always, be overly reverent with these stories. And if they're just thrown around, well, okay, it's not so great, but at least they're out there. So as I'm saying, I've seen this among storytellers and also in the culture at large, right? I mean, I don't want to just rant, but there was a kids show not long ago about Baba Yaga, the Russian witch being. It was a kids show, it was a performance, a theater performance for kids, and it was all happy and fun and like a circus. Well, that's great. I mean, we like happy, we like fun, we like the circus. But Baba Yaga is a terrifying figure, and she can help us to transform ourselves when that is necessary, and when we do not have other figures to guide us in that transition. Baba Yaga breaks you down, she destroys you, she kills you, and then sends you out, if you survive, to become something you never thought you could be, to remake yourself. In the stories, she's always like cutting people up and putting them in barrels at the bottom of the sea. But somehow they come back, and they come back with new understandings, with new awarenesses. When you're facing a divorce, a job you hate, a medical condition, a heart attack, a cancer diagnosis, I mean, I could list the trouble, but this world has trouble in it. When you need to transform, when you're sick of your job at the bank and you want to become a poet, well, Baba Yaga might be just who you need. But if your only understanding of her is of a cartoon-like figure who brings laughter and fun, she won't help you. And you will go looking in other places, and you may not find them. Well, maybe somehow you will, but we need these figures, and we are more healthy when we have access to the images, to the teachings, to the magic of these stories. All right, then. Thank you for listening to these ideas. I just have a couple more here. One thing is to wrestle with this idea we have, which is an entirely understandable idea, which is this. We think stories often are narratives describing events which have actually happened. We think of a story as a record of actual events. That's completely understandable because we're surrounded by stories like that, whether it's the news or whether it's family stories about the picnic, the camping trip. Often we encounter stories like that. And not only that, but indigenous folks, if I can use that word, in my experience, would see it the same way. The Greeks thought of the myths, like the battle between the gods and the giants. That was a real event that's actually happened. The Mahabharata, same thing. It happened a long time ago, but these are real events. So why is that not helpful? Well, it's not helpful because our worldview is much narrower than the folks who told these stories. We don't admit as many possibilities in the world. And more than that, we believe we've got it figured out. We know what's possible and what's not. So when a tree talks, when a frog talks, when something magical happens, right away we dismiss the story as something false. And there's a long history behind that. I mean, for us, I would say it's rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition, where miracles come from God. And if they don't come from God, they're from the devil. And they are to be, we should be suspicious of them. This has happened to me. I've told stories. I told Gilgamesh, the ancient Mesopotamian story. And a woman afterwards was like, is this a true story? And there was sort of a panic in her voice. Like, man, is this a true story? Like, I have to know. Why did she have to know? Well, we are all in some measure perhaps like her. Is it true or is it not, Because if it's true, I need to take it seriously, and it changes my world. And if it's not, it's just entertainment, and I can ignore this story. I can forget I ever heard it. That's the world we live in, a basically materialist worldview. We also live in a world where we tend to think there's only one story that is true at any given time. Again, I think this is the heritage of our Judeo-Christian background. And I think all monotheistic religions probably have this. There's one story. This is the story. There are no others. Polytheistic societies, well, there are many truths, and there can be this is true sometimes and this is true some other time. So for all those reasons, it's really hard for us to relate to these stories as actual historical events. And maybe it's not even advisable, because if you could do that, you would be someone else. You'd be really a radical being in this culture. Well, maybe that's what we need. But you'd be like some sort of many thousands of years old person with a totally different view. So there are ways around this which can be helpful. One of them comes from the work of Carl Jung, once again, and that is to treat these stories as expressions of psychological facts. So they are not expressions of facts in the world, like, a certain lake is 10 miles long, but expressions of truths within us, expressions of the way humans are made and built, expressions of psychological facts. So to take the story of Sleeping Beauty, for example, you can't find that castle in the world. You can't go to the French countryside and find the palace where she slept. But the truth of that story is everywhere around us. I'm the father of a daughter. I look around, I see adolescent girls growing into womanhood, and I feel the truth of that story. They are surrounded by thorns. They need to spend some time away from certain forces in the world. Don't touch, And nevertheless, the suitors, the boys, come at them. In the story, these young men end up as skeletons in the thorn bush, which is a marvelously vivid detail. So that story expresses a truth about adolescence. It doesn't describe a historical truth. And it's a little bit similar to mathematical equations, like Einstein's theory of E equals mc squared, expressing the relations between energy and mass. If you went to look for that theory, like, where would you go? I mean, if you were really skeptical and you were like, what is this thing? And, well, it's a theory, and here it is. And you write it down on paper, but you'd be like, well, that's just some letters on paper. That's not the theory. Where is this? Can I go find it? Is it in Cincinnati? Is it in Texas or Switzerland? Well, it's not. But I think Einstein or any other science-type person would say, well, this theory is a truth which is everywhere evident and expressed in all things. And this is just our language for communicating that truth. And I think you can look at story the same way. Sleeping Beauty expresses a truth which is everywhere present in the world. And you can't exactly find her palace. You can't find that thorn bush. But that truth is everywhere if you look, and if you look with the right eyes. Another is to think of them as news that stays news. That's a phrase from the poet Ezra Pound. About great art, but it applies to story as well. It's different than the news of what happens, around the world, but these are like eternal events which continue to occur. And in thinking about this, it can be helpful to remember the words of Sallust, Sallust, a Roman historian who died in 34 BC. And he said, when speaking about myths, he said, these things never happened, yet always are. These things never happened, yet always are. So you can change that around, make it a little more, smooth if you want. These stories aren't true, but they happen all the time. That's the way I've also heard that quote interpreted. And I would add two other ideas, which I have found helpful. One comes from the Middle East, from the Arabic world, and it is the concept of alam al-mithal, Alam-Al-Mithal. I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding of this is it is the realm of images, the realm of examples. It's an imaginary realm, which is nevertheless real, and it exists between the everyday world, as we experience it, and the divine world of spirits and of Allah in the Arabic conception. And it's a realm you can reach through dreams and also through story. So it is not real in the same sense that a coffee cup is, but it is real. It has real power and force in this world. And I find that a helpful concept. Also, there is the concept of the dream time, which comes from Australian Aborigines. And again, this is a word which gets thrown down a lot and tossed around. I'm not sure any of us have a deep understanding of it, but if you haven't run into it, here's my basic understanding. The stories are a record of events which happened in the dream time, which is a time at the beginning of all things, but it is also still happening. It's like a parallel reality, a parallel frequency, if you will. And we can go there in certain states. We can enter that realm of the dream time. And the stories record events that happen in the dream time and shape and create our world. They put the mountains and the rivers in certain places. So the stories are world building, but also this is ongoing. It happened in the past, but it is going on now as well. And it's this constant flowing river, basically, you can enter through trance states and through ritual and through story. All right. Well, that was a lot. And but I hope these thoughts are encouraging and inspiring to you. And if you want to tell stories, I think these ideas are good to keep in mind. Not just ideas, these ways of approaching a story. And how did I learn all this? Well, certainly teachers and books have helped me to think about these ideas and to put them into words. But for me, much of it has been just through my own experience. I was subject to many stories told by screens as a child, as we all are. I loved some of those stories so much, I acted them out with my friends. I drew pictures from them, constantly. I wanted to be in those stories. Now, these stories were corporate stories owned by big money, There was still some good in them. But I wanted to live inside them. And so when I look at fairy tales, when I look at Greek epic, the Mahabharata, I have the same impulse to live inside it. And I look at the cultures of the world and I say, I'm not alone. Others have wanted this as well. And while I'm making this journey, I'm going to say it's more helpful to think not that you possess a story, that it is inside you, like something you have, like something you remember, but instead to imagine that you are inside that story. And that also has been my experience. When I am telling a story, when I'm working on it, when it is on my mind and in my heart and in my body, I start to see it around me, in other people, in events, in the world. And then I've learned these things by telling stories and what works best for me. And also, I have this urge to preserve the sacred qualities of the story. I've been lucky enough to have been awakened to the fact that these stories have marvelous wisdom in them. Not just that. That sounds a little stale. I mean, they do, but that they give us access to realms beyond the ordinary, voyages which keep us right here and return us to our reality in a more awake and alive way. I have experienced that through other storytellers, and so I wish to preserve that in my own way of telling stories, and I wish to encourage others to do the same, because much of our world is built on commodities and owning, buying, selling things, and we often treat traditional stories as though they were very similar to things dreamed up by a talented scriptwriter in L.A. or Seattle. And they're not that way. There's something different. No disrespect to the people writing amazing scripts these days, but these stories are different. It was said to me once about India. Actually, no, it was said about China. Somebody who was all into foreign policy and the cultures of the world said to me, China is a civilization disguised as a country. And that's kind of humorous and also, I think, very true. And I think of stories in the same way. They can pass for things you find in a magazine, in the library, an episode of a TV show you like. They can be in disguise as that, but it's a different thing. There are depths there. It's like ground you walk, and in that ground there are rusty anchors and bones and a jewel from the crown of a princess who was queen of the birds 3,000 years ago and had a hawk who she sent out to fly across the world and bring her news of the boy who lived beyond the mountains. Stories are like that rich and infinite ground beneath our feet, which contains seeds and stones and all the possibilities of the future and all the memory of the past. Though often as we hurry from one moment to the next, we walk over that ground and do not see it for what it is. So I guess I'm going to stop right there. Thank you for listening to these thoughts about storytelling. I hope to record more of these sort of discussions of ways into storytelling. The next one will be telling a story, actually some of the nuts and bolts of really getting into it and making it happen. If you'd like to support this podcast, please do so. You can do so via patreon.com/storyjl, patreon.com/storyjl. And I'm thinking of that forest which is also a story. And we stand there amid the trees, and there are perhaps birds around us, and there is a little wind. And each of us there in that forest sees and hears and notices things which the others do not. And as we stand in that forest, we become part of that forest. We breathe out, and the forest breathes that carbon dioxide in, and the forest breathes out oxygen, and we breathe that in. The forest is different than it has been in the past and will be in the future. And there is weather, wind, a few leaves. And perhaps there's a deer we never noticed before, who has been watching us all of this time. She looks at us for a long time. And then, without hurrying, she turns and walks away.